British Naval Headquarters, May 26, 1942. Imperial Navy Headquarters, Sasebo. The morning briefing report lay pristine on Admiral Takeshi Yamada's desk as Commander Kenji Matsuda finished his presentation to the assembled fleet captains. Their voices carried the quiet confidence of men who believed their secrets were safe, their codes unbreakable, their victory at Coral Ridge assured. But 3,000 miles away, in a basement beneath Honolulu Harbor, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell had been reading their mail for weeks. In 72 hours, Japan would send the most powerful naval task force in her history toward what they believed would be a surprise attack. Instead, they would sail directly into the greatest trap in naval warfare history. The mathematics of Japan's defeat at Coral Ridge weren't written in the skies above the Pacific, but in the decoded messages that turned Japanese confidence into American advantage. What the assembled admirals didn't know, what the entire Japanese command wouldn't discover until bombs were falling on their carriers, was that their most secret communications had become America's greatest weapon. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell adjusted her headphones for the 15th time that morning as another stream of Japanese radio traffic crackled through the receivers at Station Magic in Honolulu. The basement facility, hidden beneath the Naval Intelligence Building, hummed with the constant chatter of intercepted enemy communications. Banks of recording equipment lined the concrete walls, their spinning reels capturing every electromagnetic whisper from across the Pacific. Strange reports had been filtering into American intelligence since early May 1942. Japanese radio traffic had increased dramatically across the Pacific, but the messages themselves defied conventional analysis. The usually predictable patterns of Imperial Navy communications had shifted into something far more urgent, far more coordinated. Mitchell, one of only 12 women cleared for the Navy's most secret cryptanalysis program, had noticed the changes first. Her background in mathematics from Wellesley College and her fluency in Japanese, learned during 3 years teaching in Tokyo before the war, made her uniquely qualified to spot anomalies in enemy transmissions. What she discovered in the intercepted signals kept her awake for 3 straight nights. At Station Magic, cryptanalysts working 20-hour shifts noticed patterns that shouldn't exist. The Japanese Navy's purple cipher, previously impenetrable, began showing vulnerabilities that suggested massive operational preparations. Messages referenced a target designated BF, but where was BF? The first breakthrough came on May 15th, when Petty Officer First Class Maria Santos, a former telephone operator from San Diego, detected unusual transmission patterns from Japanese stations in the Marshall Islands. Santos had developed an almost supernatural ability to recognize individual radio operators by their fist, the distinctive rhythm with which they sent Morse code. She noticed that operators who typically transmitted routine administrative traffic were now sending longer, more frequent messages encrypted with the highest-level naval codes. American naval intelligence intercepted thousands of coded transmissions daily. The listening posts scattered across the Pacific, from Alaska to Australia, fed a constant stream of encrypted Japanese communications to Station Magic. Each message was a 5-digit number group puzzle, transformed through complex mathematical operations that Japanese cryptographers believed made them unreadable to enemy codebreakers. But Lieutenant Commander Mitchell had discovered something that Japanese security officers didn't know. Their most trusted codes had a fatal flaw. The pattern discovery began with what seemed like coincidence. Ensign Catherine Walsh, a former librarian from Boston, noticed that certain number groups appeared with suspicious frequency in intercepted messages. Walsh had been tasked with cataloging message fragments, looking for recurring sequences that might represent common words or phrases. Her methodical approach, honed through years of organizing library collections, revealed that Japanese communications followed predictable structures. Weather reports always began with the same sequence. Supply requests used standard terminology. Most importantly, operational orders followed rigid military formats that, once identified, provided crucial context for decoding efforts. Dr. Rodriguez, the civilian mathematician recruited from the University of California, made the next critical discovery. Rodriguez had been analyzing the statistical distribution of number groups across thousands of intercepted messages. Her calculations revealed that the Japanese were reusing certain code elements far more frequently than their security protocols should have allowed. The purple cipher used a complex system where each 5-digit group represented either a word, phrase, or concept, then disguised through an additive encryption process. But Rodriguez discovered that Japanese communicators, pressed for time during intensive operations, were taking shortcuts. Code clerks were reusing favorite number sequences, creating patterns that mathematical analysis could exploit. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commanding the Pacific Fleet from his headquarters overlooking Honolulu Harbor, received daily briefings about Japanese preparations for something massive. But intelligence without certainty was worthless. The Pacific was vast, potential targets were numerous, and American forces were still recovering from the disasters of early 1942.
The Japanese had achieved stunning victories across the Pacific: Wake Island, the Philippines, Hong Kong, Singapore. Each conquest demonstrated Japanese naval and air superiority. American intelligence officers knew that Japan was preparing for another major operation, but where and when remained hidden behind layers of encryption that had frustrated Allied codebreakers for months. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's team worked in shifts around the clock, their efforts coordinated with British codebreakers at Bletchley Park and Australian intelligence officers in Melbourne. The war was being fought not just with ships and aircraft, but with mathematics and intuition, pattern recognition, and inspired guesswork. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source: a deliberately sent message about a supply shortage on a remote Pacific installation. Major Patricia Thompson, the Army Air Corps liaison to Station Magic, suggested a deception operation that would test their theories about Japanese code-breaking capabilities. Station Magic arranged for the garrison at Coral Ridge Atoll to transmit an uncoded message reporting problems with their fuel storage facilities. The message was sent on frequencies known to be monitored by Japanese intelligence, deliberately unencrypted to ensure enemy interception. Within 18 hours, Japanese communications referenced BF's fuel difficulties. The target was confirmed. Coral Ridge Atoll was Japan's objective. The truth was stunning in its implications and terrifying in its completeness. For 6 weeks, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell's team at Station Magic had been systematically penetrating Japan's most secret naval communications. The purple cipher, considered unbreakable by Japanese cryptographers and protected by elaborate security protocols, had become an open book to American codebreakers. Every Japanese plan, every ship movement, every tactical decision was being read in real time by American intelligence officers working in basement rooms beneath Honolulu. Admiral Takeshi Yamada's carefully orchestrated surprise attack on Coral Ridge had become the most well-telegraphed assault in military history. Operation Ocean Strike, Japan's plan to seize Coral Ridge and draw the American fleet into a decisive battle, was no longer a secret. Mitchell's team had decoded not just the target, but the timing, the forces involved, and even the specific positions Japanese ships would take during the attack. The intelligence was so comprehensive, it seemed too good to be true. American codebreakers knew that Admiral Yamada would approach Coral Ridge from the northwest with 4 aircraft carriers, Shokaku, Zuikaku, Hiryu, and Soryu. They knew the exact time of the planned air assault. They understood Japanese contingency plans if American forces responded faster than expected. Most remarkably, they had decoded Japanese assessments of American capabilities that revealed how completely Japan underestimated their enemy's remaining strength. Japanese intelligence believed the American Pacific Fleet was still crippled from the Pearl Harbor attack, incapable of mounting effective resistance to a well-coordinated assault. The hunters had become the hunted, but the prey remained unaware of the reversal. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's mathematical analysis had revealed the full scope of Japanese code vulnerability. The purple cipher wasn't just partially compromised. Entire categories of military communications were now readable with near 100% accuracy. Supply requests, weather reports, personnel transfers, fuel consumption data, aircraft readiness reports, the mundane administrative messages that kept the Japanese Navy functioning had become windows into enemy capabilities and intentions. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell realized that American forces possessed something unprecedented in military history: complete tactical omniscience. They could see the enemy's plans before Japanese field commanders received their orders. The roots of this intelligence breakthrough stretched back to December 7, 1941, but the story began earlier in the halls of American universities where women like Sarah Mitchell were quietly revolutionizing cryptanalysis. Mitchell had arrived in Hawaii in January 1942, one of the first female officers assigned to the Navy's most classified intelligence program. Her path to station magic began at Wellesley College, where she had graduated cum laude in mathematics in 1936. Unable to find employment matching her qualifications, most universities and corporations refused to hire female mathematicians, Mitchell had accepted a teaching position in the American School in Tokyo. Those 3 years in Japan, from 1937 to 1940, provided her with fluency in Japanese language and deep insight into Japanese culture that would prove invaluable to American code-breaking efforts. She witnessed the Japanese military's growing aggression firsthand, attending cultural events where naval officers openly discussed their nation's destiny to dominate the Pacific. When Mitchell returned to the United States in 1940, she brought with her something Japanese security services didn't know existed: detailed knowledge of how Japanese military personnel thought, communicated, and organized information. This cultural intelligence would become as valuable as mathematical skills in penetrating enemy codes. The attack on Pearl Harbor had devastated the American Pacific Fleet, but it had also provided station magic with an unexpected intelligence windfall. The Japanese submarine I-19, damaged during the attack, had been forced to surface near the harbor entrance. Before scuttling their vessel, the crew attempted to destroy classified materials, but several codebooks and cipher machines were recovered by American divers.
These captured materials provided station magic with crucial insights into Japanese cryptographic methods, but they represented only fragments of the complete system. The real breakthrough required months of painstaking analysis by some of America's most brilliant mathematical minds. Since early 1942,
A small team of cryptanalysts, linguists, and mathematicians had been working in secret beneath Honolulu Harbor. Their mission? Crack Japan's naval codes before the next major offensive. The team was unusual, not just for its mission, but for its composition. Of the 47 personnel assigned to Station Magic, 12 were women, an unprecedented ratio in military intelligence. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell led a team that included Dr. Elena Rodriguez, whose doctoral dissertation on statistical analysis had been classified by the War Department. Major Patricia Thompson, a former Army Air Corps pilot who brought tactical aviation knowledge to code analysis, and Ensign Catherine Walsh, whose library science background proved essential for organizing the massive volume of intercepted communications. The Japanese Navy's Purple Cipher used a complex system that challenged even the most sophisticated 1942 cryptanalytic techniques. Messages began as plain-text Japanese, were translated into 5-digit number groups representing words or concepts, then encrypted using additive keys that changed according to predetermined schedules. Breaking such a system required not just mathematical skill, but deep understanding of Japanese military culture, language patterns, and operational procedures. American codebreakers needed to think like Japanese naval officers to predict what enemy commanders might communicate and how they would structure their messages. The work was exhausting and often seemed hopeless. Dr. Rodriguez calculated that fully mapping the Purple Cipher would require analyzing over 100,000 intercepted messages, a task that seemed impossible given the time constraints imposed by ongoing military operations. But the team at Station Magic possessed something their Japanese counterparts didn't anticipate: absolute dedication fueled by personal motivation. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell had witnessed Japanese aggression in China. Major Thompson had lost her brother at Pearl Harbor. Dr. Rodriguez's family had fled Spanish fascism, and she understood the stakes of the global conflict. By May 1942, Mitchell's team had achieved partial breaks into Purple Cipher communications. They could read fragments, dates, locations, unit designations, but complete messages remained elusive. The intelligence was tantalizing but incomplete, like trying to understand a conversation by hearing every third word. The breakthrough that changed everything came through traffic analysis, studying not what the messages said, but when, where, and how they were transmitted. Petty Officer Maria Santos discovered that Japanese radio operators, despite their training, developed recognizable patterns. Certain operators transmitted at specific times of day. Emergency communications used different frequencies than routine messages. Most importantly, Santos realized that major Japanese operations generated predictable communication signatures. As fleets assembled and received their orders, radio traffic increased in volume and urgency. By mapping these patterns, American intelligence could detect Japanese preparations for major operations even before enemy commanders finalized their plans. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of Pearl Harbor and Japan's greatest naval strategist, believed Coral Ridge would provide the decisive battle Japan needed. His plan was elegant in its simplicity: seize the strategic atoll, force the American fleet to respond, then destroy it in open combat. Japanese superiority in ships, aircraft, and experience would ensure victory. Yamamoto's strategy reflected Japanese naval doctrine developed over decades of successful operations. Japanese carriers had proven their superiority from Pearl Harbor to Ceylon. Japanese pilots possessed combat experience unmatched by American aviators. Japanese ships incorporated lessons learned from 2 years of Pacific warfare. What Yamamoto couldn't know was that his encrypted communications detailing this plan were being read by his enemies before some of his own subordinates received their orders. The process of breaking the Purple Cipher required a combination of mathematical analysis, pattern recognition, cultural intuition, and technological innovation that pushed 1942 capabilities to their absolute limits. Station Magic operated using IBM tabulating machines, the most advanced computing technology available to American forces. These room-sized mechanical calculators, originally designed for census data processing, had been modified for cryptanalytic work. Punched cards containing intercepted messages were sorted, analyzed, and cross-referenced through thousands of mathematical operations that would have been impossible to perform manually. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell's breakthrough methodology combined rigorous mathematical analysis with intuitive understanding of Japanese communication patterns. The 5-digit groups that comprised Japanese messages were cataloged in massive databases, with each group tracked across every intercepted transmission to identify frequency patterns, contextual relationships, and temporal associations. Dr. Rodriguez developed the statistical framework that made systematic code breaking possible. Her analysis revealed that Japanese communicators, despite security protocols, used certain number combinations far more frequently than random distribution would suggest. These favorite sequences provided entry points for deeper cryptanalytic penetration.
British mathematical challenge was staggering. Each intercepted message contained an average of 205-digit groups. With over 1,000 messages intercepted daily, Station Magic processed 200,000 encrypted number groups every 24 hours. Identifying patterns in this volume of data required analytical techniques that wouldn't become common in civilian applications for decades. Ensign Catherine Walsh contributed organizational methods that proved as valuable as mathematical calculations. Her library science training provided systematic approaches to cataloging and cross-referencing the massive databases required for effective cryptanalysis. Walsh developed filing systems that allowed rapid retrieval of specific message types, enabling pattern recognition across thousands of communications. The breakthrough in understanding Japanese communication structure came through cultural analysis that complemented mathematical techniques. Major Patricia Thompson's aviation experience helped her recognize that Japanese flight operations followed standardized reporting procedures. Weather updates, fuel consumption reports, aircraft readiness assessments all followed predictable formats that, once identified, provided crucial context for code-breaking efforts. Japanese naval communications reflected the rigid hierarchical structure of imperial military culture. Orders flowed downward through established chains of command using formal language patterns. Status reports followed standardized formats. Even emergency communications adhered to protocols that American analysts learned to recognize and exploit. The BF designation appeared in 347 separate intercepts throughout May 1942. Context analysis suggested it represented a target location, but identifying the specific objective required innovative deception techniques. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell proposed the fuel shortage deception that definitively identified Coral Ridge as the Japanese objective. The deception was elegant in its simplicity, but required careful coordination to avoid arousing Japanese suspicions. Station Magic arranged for Coral Ridge's garrison to transmit routine administrative messages referencing fuel storage difficulties. The message was crafted to sound genuine while containing specific terminology that would be easily recognizable in Japanese intelligence summaries. Within 24 hours of the deception transmission, Japanese communications referenced BF's fuel problems, confirming both the target identification and the effectiveness of American code-breaking capabilities. But confirming Yamada's objective was only the beginning of Station Magic's intelligence coup. Petty Officer Maria Santos made the crucial discovery that revolutionized American understanding of Japanese operational planning. Santos realized that Japanese fleet communications followed temporal patterns that revealed not just what operations were planned, but when they would occur.
As Japanese forces prepared for major operations, communication patterns shifted in predictable ways. Initial planning phases generated high-volume encrypted traffic as commanders coordinated logistics and tactics. As operations approached, communication frequency decreased, while message priority increased. Finally, during operational phases, radio silence was maintained except for emergency communications. By mapping these communication signatures, Santos could predict the timing of Japanese operations with remarkable accuracy. Her analysis of traffic patterns in late May 1942 indicated that Japan's Coral Ridge operation would commence on May 29, information that proved precisely correct. The technology that enabled Station Magic's success represented cutting-edge cryptanalysis capability that few military organizations possessed in 1942. The IBM tabulating machines for statistical analysis required specially trained operators who understood both the mechanical systems and the mathematical principles underlying cryptanalytic work. Dr. Rodriguez supervised the technical teams responsible for maintaining and programming the tabulating equipment. The machines operated continuously, processing punch card data through complex sorting and counting operations that identified frequency patterns in intercepted communications. But technology alone couldn't break the purple cipher. The breakthrough required human insight that no machine could provide. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's team possessed a rare combination of mathematical brilliance, cultural understanding, linguistic skill, and operational intuition that enabled them to think like their Japanese counterparts. By May 28, American intelligence had achieved something unprecedented in military history. Station Magic possessed not just knowledge of Japanese intentions, but comprehensive understanding of enemy capabilities, timing, tactics, and even contingency plans that Japanese field commanders were still receiving through their own communication channels. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell held in her hands intelligence so detailed it seemed impossible. The complete Japanese battle plan for Operation Ocean Strike lay decoded on her desk. 4 aircraft carriers approaching from the northwest, airstrikes scheduled for dawn on May 29th, supporting cruisers positioned to intercept American reinforcements. Admiral Takeshi Yamada's carriers, Shokaku, Zukaku, Hiryu, and Tsuruyu, the most experienced and deadly naval aviation force in the world, were sailing toward Coral Ridge with absolute confidence in their codes, their plans, and their inevitable victory. But waiting for them in the Pacific were 3 American carriers whose commanders knew exactly when, where, and how the enemy would attack. Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown had positioned themselves not to respond to Japanese moves, but to spring the most devastating trap in naval history.
The greatest reversal in naval warfare was about to unfold, orchestrated by a team of American codebreakers working in secret beneath Honolulu Harbor. Japanese confidence, built on 2 years of Pacific victories, would shatter against American preparation born from broken codes and mathematical brilliance. The stage was set for a battle where knowledge would prove more devastating than firepower, where invisible victories in basement cryptanalysis rooms would determine the fate of visible fleets on the Pacific Ocean. In less than 18 hours, the war would change forever, and Japan would never know that their defeat began not with enemy bombs, but with their own decoded messages. Dawn, May 29, 1942. Admiral Takeshi Yamada stood on the bridge of the carrier Shokaku, watching his strike aircraft launch into the pre-dawn darkness. 400 miles behind him in Honolulu, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell monitored Japanese radio transmissions in real time, watching Japan's most carefully planned operation unfold exactly as her decoded intelligence had predicted. At 0630 hours, Japanese dive bombers approached Coral Ridge Atoll, expecting to find a sleeping garrison and empty anchorages. Instead, they encountered the most intense anti-aircraft fire in Pacific War history.
American defenders, warned by Mitchell's intelligence, had spent 3 days preparing for this exact moment. Every gun was manned, every ammunition locker filled, every defensive position reinforced. But the real shock came 30 minutes later. As Admiral Yamada's carriers recovered their strike aircraft, American dive bombers appeared on the horizon, not as desperate defenders responding to attack, but as perfectly positioned hunters who had been waiting all night. The carriers Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown had used Mitchell's decoded intelligence to achieve tactical perfection. They knew the exact positions of Japanese carriers. They understood Japanese defensive formations. Most crucially, they attacked at the precise moment when Japanese flight decks were crowded with returning aircraft and fuel lines were exposed. The first American bomb struck Shokaku at 0847 hours, precisely when Station Magic had calculated Japanese forces would be most vulnerable. Admiral Yamada watched his flagship erupt in flames, still not understanding how American forces had achieved such perfect timing and positioning. Within 6 hours, Japan's most experienced carrier task force had been destroyed. 4 carriers, 248 aircraft, and over 3,000 veteran personnel, including Admiral Yamada himself, had been eliminated in what Japanese survivors described as an impossible American ambush. But the true impact extended far beyond a single battle. Mitchell's intelligence coup had revealed something more valuable than Japanese battle plans: the complete vulnerability of Japanese communications. Every major operation, every strategic decision, every tactical innovation was now readable by American cryptanalysts. The psychological impact on Japanese naval command proved as devastating as the material losses. Captain Hiroshi Nakamura, the senior surviving officer from Yamada's task force, reported to Imperial headquarters that American forces had demonstrated supernatural knowledge of Japanese intentions. His report triggered a massive investigation into communication security that found nothing, because Japanese security officers couldn't imagine their codes had been completely broken. In the weeks following Coral Ridge, Japanese naval operations became increasingly paralyzed by uncertainty. Commanders who had previously operated with confidence now second-guessed every decision, wondering if their communications were somehow being intercepted. The initiative that had driven Japanese expansion across the Pacific evaporated as commanders became afraid of their own radio transmissions. The human stories behind Station Magic's triumph remained classified for decades. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell received the Navy Distinguished Service Medal in a secret ceremony attended only by 12 people. Her citation read simply, "For exceptional service in naval communications," giving no hint of her role in the most decisive intelligence victory of the war. Dr. Elena Rodriguez returned to civilian life, her contributions to cryptanalysis never publicly acknowledged. She spent the rest of her career teaching mathematics at a small college in California, never revealing that her statistical methods had helped break the back of Japanese naval power. Students knew her only as a demanding professor with an unusual interest in pattern recognition. Petty Officer Maria Santos continued monitoring Japanese communications throughout the war. Her unique ability to identify radio operators by their transmission patterns provided crucial intelligence for subsequent Pacific operations. She remained in the Navy after the war, eventually becoming one of the first female chief petty officers in communications intelligence. The captured Japanese personnel revealed the complete effectiveness of American code-breaking efforts. Captain Nakamura, interrogated after the war, admitted that Japanese Naval Command had never suspected their most secret codes were compromised. "We believed our communications were perfectly secure," he told Allied investigators. "The idea that enemy cryptanalysts could read our messages seemed impossible."
British. The intelligence triumph at Coral Ridge achieved something unprecedented in military history: a complete information advantage that eliminated the element of chance from naval combat. American forces knew not just what the enemy planned to do, but exactly how and when they planned to do it. The statistics revealed the devastating effectiveness of intelligence warfare. Station Magic's 47 personnel, working with 1942 technology in basement rooms, had neutralized Japan's most powerful naval task force more completely than thousands of bombs or torpedoes could have achieved. The code-breaking breakthrough revolutionized military communications worldwide. Every major power immediately began developing more sophisticated encryption methods, leading to an intelligence arms race that continued throughout the Cold War. The techniques pioneered by Mitchell's team became the foundation for modern signals intelligence, influencing everything from diplomatic communications to commercial data security. Most importantly, the success demonstrated that wars could be won not just through superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but through mathematical analysis and technological innovation. The age of pure physical warfare was ending, replaced by conflicts where information became the most decisive weapon. The Battle of Coral Ridge stands as history's most perfect example of intelligence determining military outcomes. In 8 hours of combat, American forces achieved what years of traditional naval warfare might not have accomplished: the complete elimination of Japan's carrier aviation capability and the beginning of their inevitable defeat. Yet the true architects of this victory remained invisible, working in basement rooms with primitive computers and brilliant minds. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell and her team proved that the most devastating weapons are often those the enemy never sees, not bombs or bullets, but broken codes and decoded secrets. The Japanese never fully understood what happened at Coral Ridge. Even after the war, many Japanese naval officers believed they had been defeated by superior American tactics rather than superior American intelligence. They never learned that their most trusted communications had become their enemy's greatest advantage. In the end, Japan's defeat began not with Pearl Harbor's revenge, but with mathematics, intuition, and the quiet dedication of codebreakers who turned enemy confidence into Allied victory. The war's outcome was written not in the skies above the Pacific, but in the decoded messages that revealed every secret Japan tried to hide. Station Magic's legacy reminds us that in warfare, as in life, the most powerful victories often come not from what we destroy, but from what we understand. Knowledge, wielded with precision and courage, remains the ultimate weapon. Invisible, unstoppable, and absolutely decisive.